All right. Now we're going to be talking about. I take this very seriously because I am a parent, and I've also had a bit of a rough upbringing to a degree, and so I get very protective of children in the sense of them being able to maintain and hang on to their innocence as long as humanly possible before the world starts to inflict the world on them. And one of the things that I want to talk about is whether or not children should, in general, this is particularly pertaining to Mortal Kombat, since we are a fighting game channel here, but in particular, whether or not, obviously a child should play Mortal Kombat, and this sort of permeates then to other adult concept type games that are out there as well, be it other fighting games or whatnot. The short answer is no. Absolutely not. Right? And but there are certain age brackets that you start to get into, and we're going to talk about that. But a bit of a history with Mortal Kombat is that when it first came out, it actually was so powerful in its introduction into the world that it changed the rating system to accommodate for these types of games out there. Now, I'm perfectly fine as an adult, or even as a teenager when I was playing these things, because I was understanding the world a heck of a lot more than someone at the age of 4, 5, or 6. Within a year, even 6 months, a child can grow and change so much. So by having safeguards in place, or simply just going, nope, you're not old enough yet to even experience this, that's where it all starts. It all starts with parenting, okay? You don't know the long-term ramifications of what it will be like if you expose young children to these adult concepts, be it horror movies, violent fighting games, violent video games in general. We're not talking about adults here, we're not talking about teenagers, we're talking about little kids who can barely understand the world, and you are trying to introduce them to things which they may now think is normal to do. They might go to school and try and punch someone because, well, daddy or mummy let me play this fighting game, and that's what they do, and they just get back up again and everything's fine. These are some of the conversations and lessons that you need to explain to your child as real world consequences. And this just doesn't permeate with Mortal Kombat. It goes to, when young kids, little kids are even watching like kids TV shows where there might be like, the bad guy might get punched. There's no blood or gore or excessive sort of damage or anything like that. But it is showcasing that, okay, this is just a show. It's not real. You don't do this in the real world. You try and work out things without resorting to violence, because if you do, you both lose. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you be a pacifist either, but the first general rule of what I got taught when I was learning martial arts is to walk away. That is the first thing you do. You walk away if somebody's trying to pick a fight with you or anything like that, because at the end of the day, you don't know how it's going to go. No one can predict how it's going to go. It's not a movie. We don't have a script. You might go, oh, right, well, I saw in the movie that, yeah, I'm just going to sock them. You might miss, and then they pick up something and hit you, and then you end up with brain damage for the rest of your life. You don't know what's going to happen. So that's why I was always taught, walk away. Self-defense is self-defense for a reason. And that is why it's also very important with parents that they, if a child is watching something or whatever, that they have proper guidance into understanding that this isn't real, this is all make-believe, they're not actually being hurt, but if you do this in the real world, people can be hurt, and you should always be kind and considerate and nice to people in general. So with Mortal Kombat specifically, because there is blood in the game, when Mortal Kombat 1, the original, came out, the Super Nintendo version actually released a version that had no gore at all. It didn't depict the horrible fatalities that we all have come to know and love at all. And the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis version, by default, as you can see, launched without blood being shown. You had to put in a blood code to activate. And of course, when you finally get the game as a young teenager, you're like, you're doing it. But I was a teenager when I started playing this, right? So it's very, very important to start making sure as a parent you are seeing and watching everything that they're doing. get your children to ask permission to load up a game, ask them what they're playing. And when my kids eventually started to play their games online, I especially wanted to know what game they were playing, if they were talking to anyone. And up until the age of 18, my son was always asking, oh, is it okay if I talk to these people? Why? Because I have seen kids go off the rails and whatnot, or have things affect them deeply because they've gotten in online chats and they've heard things they never heard before. They repeat these things or say these things, or people tell them it's normal to do this and do that to your parents and treat them like this or that. And they go and do it, and they're in a massive shock when they find out that their parents get mad as heck because of this. You know, they thought that, oh, well, this kid, Timmy, said this online, so it was fine for me to say. It's not fine. I've had both my kids affected by people online, and that is with me monitoring. But the reason why it didn't last long is because I was able to notice the changes in my children's behavior. And because of that, I was able to, because I know what they were doing, I was able to start going, okay, what's going on? You've been talking to this guy, his name's John. What's John doing? You know, and then my son will say, oh yeah, he's been making me feel like this and saying horrible things like that. And I'll say, okay, it is time to just remove and walk away from him. And they do. That is what it's all about. We know that children are growing up in an online-only world, or online constantly world. And so, you know, you have to be even more vigilant with that. Now, I had a pretty rough upbringing. You know, I'm not going to go into detail, but I had my innocence snatched at a very early age. And so therefore, I'm highly protective of children lasting as long as possible to hang on to their innocence. So with things like Mortal Kombat, I absolutely agree. Now, we've got a lot of conversation going on about, you know, oh, let's, you know, we need to have a thing in there to hide the gore and stuff. But, and I mean no disrespect with that, but, and I understand too, but it's all for selfish reasons, right? They're doing it because they don't want to get demonetized, they don't want to get restricted. And I think there's a far more important reason here, and that's the reason that it was there to begin with originally. And that was to make sure that young people that may be old enough to start dabbling a bit in fighting games are not exposed to the massive amounts of gore, blood, violence, and fatalities, and stage fatalities that would go on in these particular games. So they've been doing it since the very beginning. It's only in recent decade or so that they've actually had this, for whatever reason, they've decided not to just simply include a toggle. And it would be very easy to do. You could easily change the blood color, just like that, easily. You can make it so that you can still perform fatal blows and fatalities. Or if, okay, so let's work around that. There's a couple of options. With fatal blows, let's start. You can simply pop up a dragon logo over the screen. The rest of the screen behind it goes blurred, so much so that you can't see any detail. And then you'd have some sort of overlaying like ambient track. So that way you don't not only not see the violence, you also don't hear the violence as well. The bone crunching, the ripping, the tearing, that sort of thing. For the fatalities, there's two options. You could either make it so you have the very similar thing as well, or you simply just make it so that, you know, if you have a couple of parental control options, and the most extreme one would be, is that, okay, it just doesn't allow you to do it. It just disables fatalities completely. I think that would be a wonderful compromise, but I look at that from a parenting perspective, not a monetary perspective. Okay, now my son probably started playing a little bit of Mortal Kombat, probably about 11 or 12, but I sat with him the whole time for a long time watching it, right? And making sure that he never did fatalities, never did the X-rays or anything of that nature, and that if the computer did it, for him to turn away. Now, one day I remember he was sitting on the computer playing Mortal Kombat, and I went out to the kitchen to grab a drink. And this has been after a while. I've been watching him do this. And as I was coming back, he had no idea I was coming back. We had carpet, so he couldn't hear me. It was one of the proudest moments of my life as a parent, because I was watching and the computer went to do an an X-ray against him, and he immediately did this. Just instantly turned away. Why? Because I taught him about the audio cues for when the thing is performed, and I told him to look away. And he did. And for that, I'm incredibly proud of him. And it was only until probably like mid to late teenage years that he started to see some of the stuff that, you know, I was obviously keeping from him. And he was fine. So, no, you shouldn't be having little 4, 5, 6-year-olds playing video games of this particular nature, of any sort of nature like that. I've had it so that, even with something like GTA, you can make it so that, no, you can't shoot people, you can't go punch people, all right? Just drive your car. Get in the car, drive it around. Obviously, you do not pull people out of cars in the street for real. But I don't want you aiming for people. I simply want you to drive around. It's no different as playing in any other racing game where you're driving around, and even some of them where, even the kids' games where they're like kart racing games where you're actually shooting things to disable the vehicle, but there's no blood or explosions or anything like that. So you can, to a certain age, right, especially when they start to sort of delve into maybe like high school, or even a bit before that, you can start introducing them to these games. Now, a lot of my son's friends, when they were in like grade 3 or 4, they literally were stuck in front of their Xbox or PlayStation, and that became the babysitter. The parents walked away, and these kids were playing Call of Duty, they were playing Dragon Age, and while there might be some people watching this video out there going, yeah, I did that and I'm fine, it's not the point. Parents that do that, hand in your parent card. I'm sorry, but like that is inexcusable to simply just put your little kid in front of adult concept type games and just walk away without monitoring them or anything like that at all. Now, I do know that, back in my day, we didn't have so much as shooting games. We had platformers and stuff. Most of them did not have blood. You had things like Sonic where you're bouncing on things, or Mario where you're bouncing on things, so you're essentially, in essence, committing a form of violence, but it is not egregious to what we would see in, say, an actual fighting game. So when, and again, you sort of watch it and you go, okay, no, playing Sonic's fine, or playing Mario's fine, you've made sure it's all safe, get them to ask permission before they start playing something so you know what they're doing, right? You don't just walk away and leave them there for 5 hours, playing Dragon Age at the age of 5 or 6, okay? You don't do that. Or God of War. So, but when you start sort of getting closer to the years of high school, then you can start to introduce them to stuff, but you can also monitor it and tell them, okay, you can do this, but you can't do that. If this happens, you look away. It's not hard, okay? I know some parents out there just seem to think that, oh, they can just play whatever and it's fine. But again, there are consequences, long terms, to how, I'm not saying they're going to suddenly go out and be violent. What I'm saying is, like, psychologically, it'll change how they see the world. That's why we don't show little kids horror movies either. Right? This isn't just a video game thing. There's a specific reason why children, and look, I'm no psychologist or psychiatrist, but you can go ask the experts. There's a reason why we don't. Their brain can't handle it, or they misinterpret it, or they think it's normal. And so that's why it's very, very, very important to make sure that you preserve their innocence as long as possible. And if they do so, well, I want to play a bit of Mortal Kombat. I want to play a bit of Mortal Kombat with Daddy, right? So you go, okay, and you what color would you like the stuff that comes out of them? You don't even have to say it's blood, because at that point they shouldn't even know it's blood, right? Oh, we'll make it pink or rainbow colored or whatever, or maybe even turn it off completely. And then, and then they can still do their fatal blows, which is a super move, but they don't have to see it. And you could just say, oh, it's so full on, like only the gods can know what's really going on. We mere mortals, we just have to pretend what's happening, and they'll laugh and stuff like that. You can have fun with it, and while protecting them, and also enjoy a little bit of some of the things that you might like. I love playing Mortal Kombat, and I was happy to be able to play Mortal Kombat with my son, and my daughter actually plays fighting games now as well. She doesn't seem all that interested in Mortal Kombat, but she plays Tekken and things like that, and Soul Calibur, and some of the anime fighting games. And of course, naturally, there's no blood in those, and the super moves are all fine. They just punch and kick a lot. But the same premise still applies about, no, you do not go out and kick someone in the head just because this character did. Like, you don't do that to people. That this is make-believe, the same way that you would explain that for a movie or TV show, cartoon, or anything like that. You see Disney cartoons where, you know, they'll actually pull out a sword and battle people and things like that. And you say, yeah, like, this is make-believe. You don't actually do that. So going back to Mortal Kombat, you could absolutely bring in safer options for obviously like monetization reasons or whatever. But me personally, it's more about, you know, just like they did back in these days. That's why I specifically had the Mega Drive version playing. Because without putting the blood code in, you can't access it. You literally just play the game without it. There is no way to enable blood mode unless you put in a code. Okay? So, and that would be the thing too, naturally, that if they had toggle switches, then you would make it so that, you know, like obviously, like, you know, if you suddenly come out one day and the blood's been turned on and you didn't do it, then your child has done a no-no and they get in trouble. Because kids don't understand that, you know, good parents are trying to keep them safe as long as possible and make sure that, you know, they have a nice, innocent, happy upbringing that they can enjoy. And sometimes they might want to play the favorite game that daddy or mummy's playing and stuff like that. And you go, oh, it's Mortal Kombat, there's blood, there's fatalities and stuff. And you go, oh, that's right. No, that's okay. We can just enable these couple of modes and yeah, we can have some fun, right? And just, again, keep in mind that no, you cannot channel lightning or fly through the air in a single frame with a kick. Just saying. Right, can't do that. Don't try and do that. If I hear that you've gone to school and tried to punch people or things like that, you will never play this game again. Okay? It's not hard. Really, it's not hard. And my kids both grew up to not only respect that, but I think also that they, you know, have a you know, a greater understanding of that sort of thing. I mean, they both have had, you know, incidences with people online where, you know, these kids have parents that don't seem to care all that much about what they do, what they say. You know, some of them have been swearing, you know, at a very early age, and like, I know kids will swear and think it's funny and stuff like that, but, you know, in the house, no, you don't, right? Like, you know, I'm a pretty relaxed sort of dad, but when it comes to making sure that my kids do not have their innocence compromised like mine was, I am always going to go into bat and make sure that if there is an opportunity for a company out there or a developer to do something with their game that allows them to, you know what, we'll censor this and we'll make it so that, yeah, I you know, like maybe a younger audience, depending on what the particular game is, might be able to enjoy this by being able to disable or censor some of these things, then why not? I mean, both the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive version of the original Mortal Kombat sold bucket loads. And I think most MK games up until the last decade had toggles. It's not hard to do. I mean, you guys are the experts, right? And so, you know, that's, to me, that's more important than, oh, I might get the video demonetized because I show a fatality or a fatal blow, right? I'd actually like to see some developers have a little bit more responsibility and go, you know what? Maybe so that when you've got a young kid running around at home and daddy's playing Mortal Kombat, that as a compromise, you can just disable certain things. Or, you know, sometimes you might pause the game if your kid's playing in the lounge room or something like that. Or if they're going to be there a while, then, you know, you have these options available so that way, you know, you can still enjoy the things that you like, but at the same time, you're also making sure that when that child's looking up, he's not seeing people's limbs literally being torn out of their sockets, or their heads being cleaved off, or, you know, like, you know, whatever. It's bad enough that kids go to school and they have kids there who have not been given the opportunity to have their innocence preserved, and they run around and telling everyone, oh, this and that or whatever. And I know kids will always do that. It doesn't make it right. And it doesn't mean that just because one kid's like that, that everyone else has to follow suit. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I don't know if NetherRealm are going to do it. I certainly, put it this way, it's not going to be something that's going to tank sales. It's a toggle option. And I've already given you examples about how incredibly easy it would be to do that. Okay? Incredibly easy. So, just my thoughts. Anyway, guys, see you next time.